What if in 2,000 years we said, hey, look, there's a guy here writing about New York City. It's got the Empire State Building, the Statue of Liberty. Here's where it is. Here's the names of the streets. Therefore, there's a good case to be made that Spider-Man's true. That takes place in New York City. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah. And I haven't heard any of them make this case, so hopefully I'm not strawman in their position. But
wait a second. You're going to start off your entire segment here with, I've never heard an atheist say this shit, but, hopefully I'm not strawmanning them when I say what I'm about to say, which, just to reiterate, I've never heard them say this shit. Are you fucking serious?
I mean, just think about it kind of practically here. Like, during the time in the first century too, during the time of Jesus, the disciples, the first Christians, they were willing to die for Jesus, right? For the truth of Christianity and of Christ's resurrection.
Are you serious? They wouldn't die for a lie? Like that's the argument that you're pulling out of your back pocket right here in order to say that, oh, the Spider-Man analogy shit. Really? Come on, John. You gotta have a better argument against the Spider-Man analogy than, they wouldn't die for a lie, or that. No, I feel like the direction that he's going here is that, oh, nobody would die for Spider-Man. Taking Spider-Man as we currently understand him and pitting him against Jesus is not a fair comparison. And that's not the analogy that's used. The analogy that's used is, hey, what if in the future we have no historical records from now except for these comic books that paint a fantastical character out of this guy Spider-Man? We would probably believe that he was a historical figure too. And your thing is, oh, well, people wouldn't die for a lie. How do you know? There are plenty of people in the comic books that would die for Spider-Man. So how do you know that they wouldn't die how do you know they wouldn't die for Spider-Man or anything like that? Like, I don't know. This just seems like a stupid argument.
So that's obviously different. You're not going to get a lot of people today that are going to be willing to die for Spider-Man, given that Spider-Man is willing to stake their lives on it, right? You're just not going to get that. And even if you say that maybe some people would, sure, but that's not going to be a whole community like it was in the New Testament of these Jews that were very devout and had every reason to reject Jesus being God in the flesh and resurrecting. They weren't predicting a Messiah a dying and rising Messiah, and especially in the middle of time. You know what I mean? The resurrection is supposed to come at the end of time. So
I feel like what John McRae is doing here is he's kind of shooting his own self in his foot. Because if you're going to sit there and say that the Old Testament prophesizes Jesus's, everything that Jesus did, his death, his resurrection, and saying that, there were no Jews that were expecting this, while at the same time knowing that Paul writes that the Old Testament informs him about these things, that according to the scriptures, these things happen to Jesus. It amazes me how quickly Christian apologists are just like, well, nobody was expecting this. Are you fucking kidding me? Paul writes about how he was expecting it. How a certain interpretation of Old Testament scripture was definitely expecting it. And also to dispel this notion that nobody would have died for Spider-Man, or nobody would have potentially died or given up their life for Spider-Man, I submit this as evidence.
He's mine!
You want to get to him, you got to go through me.
And me.
Me too.
Very well.
Let's say the only thing that we had was this movie, and we have no information about this movie. It could be a dramatization or whatever. You could treat it exactly like the Gospels. Let's say the Gospels are a dramatization of Jesus's life. And of course, Jesus is depicted as being this magical person, but that's all part of the dramatization of it, right? Let's say a historical person existed. Well, in Spider-Man 2, people were willing to stand up to Doc Ock and prevent Doc from taking Spider-Man. They were willing to lay down their lives in order to protect Spider-Man and stand up for him. And so this is actually better than what happened with Jesus, because with Jesus died, resurrected, and then went to heaven. And then followers are expected to lay down their lives to believe in Jesus. What's claimed by Christians didn't even fucking happen. Like, I'm not saying that Christians weren't persecuted later, but what I'm saying is that people that supposedly knew Jesus, we don't know if they died. We don't know if they were persecuted. We don't know if they were martyred. We don't know a goddamn thing about them. You know why? Because we don't have any records about them. Of course, John McRae, Braxton, and Inspiring Philosophy are going to say that the Gospels are historical documents that are eyewitness accounts in one fashion or another. I'm not sure about Inspiring Philosophy's view on the Gospels and whether or not they're eyewitness accounts, but I definitely know that Braxton and John McRae are down that alley. But suggesting that the Gospels are eyewitness accounts is counterintuitive to what we know about historical accounts of real people. And to use that to say that we know anything about the supposed eyewitnesses of Jesus is just wrong. I don't know how else to put it without being a dick, but it's just wrong. It's counter to all the academics that are currently working in the field, except for the evangelical and I guess New Testament people, like real historians. They acknowledge the fact that the Gospels are not historical accounts that were written by eyewitnesses. Plenty of work has been done on this, so to act like they are eyewitness accounts is a bit ridiculous. But again, John McRae, just like Michael Jones over there, is painting the Christian ideas and Jewish ideas as being monolithic ideas, as being one particular theology that is shared by all Christians or all Jews. And that's just simply not what happened. And I know that they're not directly saying, oh, Christians only believe this, but they are implying that this was the only thing that they were expecting. This was the only narrative that they were running with. That's what they're implying here. While they may not explicitly be saying that, they are definitely suggesting that. But in the end, we don't know if eyewitnesses to Jesus were ever martyred for just believing in Jesus. We don't know if they were killed. They eventually died. But my point is that we know nothing about them, so there's no way that you can use, they wouldn't have died for a lie, and people wouldn't die for Spider-Man because Spider-Man's a lie. Therefore, Jesus is real. Praise Jesus, Dick!
So anyways, it goes against their expectations, but they still fell down and worshiped a man as God, and also were willing to stake their lives on that claim. So much so that there's reports of them even laughing when they were going to be executed and stuff, because they had that much trust and confidence that Jesus was the true God. So the equivalent to Spider-Man, not a good one in my opinion.
Well, of course, in your opinion, it's not going to be a good idea. Obviously, it's not going to be a good idea. You're totally starstruck with the Jesus story. So yeah, you're not going to think it's a good idea. But the situations that he's talking about here with the martyrs and people laughing at their deaths or whatever, I don't know where he's getting that from. I perfectly fine assuming that he's correct on it, but I would have to press X to doubt about anything that they say in this video. My point is that the people that he's talking about were being martyred and executed and persecuted and everything like that far after the euhemerization of Jesus into history. So yes, Christians that are third or fourth, generation Christians living, in the 2nd century and beyond, they were being martyred for their faith because they believed in it, and there was no reason for them to doubt what they believed. So they were fine, dying for what they believed in. This does not prove the truth of what they believe. And I would say the exact same thing as the Spider-Man evidence presented here. Just because some people on the train were willing to stand in front of a human octopus guy doesn't mean that story is true. Just like Spider-Man taking place in New York and having all of these real world cities that are frequented in the Marvel universe, that does not mean that any of that is historical. And going back to Christianity, just because Pilate is mentioned, just because King David is mentioned, or even Solomon, or any of the historical places that we know exist are mentioned in the Bible, that doesn't then mean that the Bible is historical or historically accurate. Now, I'm not going to say that the entirety of the Bible is fictional in a sense, because while they do get some people, places, and events correct in the fact that they happened, all of those minute details does not mean that the entire story of the Bible, especially the Gospels, are true or historical. I think that you got to do a lot more academic research into whether or not they are historical, which has been done, and the verdict has come out to be that they are most likely fictional. Like, as in, most of the Gospels, most of the New Testament is not representative of history. While some portions may be representative of history, for the most part, they are not considered historical documents, like historically reliable documents.